Adventures. Terry King here. Welcome to the channel. Well, I'm sitting at the side of the road in my 57 Chev with what is another critical systems failure. Hamish is coming along with a car trailer and we're going to load this thing up and I'll show you exactly what's happened. Stick around. Well, as you can see, I've got the car back home now. And let me explain to you how something went from something that was reasonably annoying to something that was absolutely devastating. But first of all, let's have a look at what the problem was to land me on the side of the road waiting for Hamish and a trailer. And here is the critical systems failure. That QA1 coilover shock has punched through the bottom of the control arm and come out here. You can see this thin sheet metal here is just let go, and the shocky is punched straight through, and then that is dragged along the ground as the front end of the car is dropped. There's another angle from the inside of the lower control arm. You can see it's just punched that completely out. The other side hasn't let go yet. So one of the morals of this story is never use stock lower control arms when you've got coilover suspension, because all of the force sits here, which is on the top of that control arm, and it'll just weaken that over time and punch through. So Hamish now arrives, and I'm at the point where I'm ready to back the car onto the trailer. No problem at all, just line her up and back her up the ramps. I got the ass end of the car onto the trailer, no problems, but it wasn't quite lined up properly. You don't have a lot of room on those trailers. You probably only got a couple of inches on either side of the car, and it just wasn't quite lined up properly. So I said to Hamish, okay, listen, mate, I'll drive this thing back down the ramp, square it up a little bit more, and back it onto the trailer. And the ramps on the trailer didn't look too dissimilar to this, except for the perforations on the ramp itself were a lot larger. They were big square perforations. So now I'm driving the car forward to pull it off of the trailer. As the front goes down that ramp, the end of the shock, which is punched through the lower control arm, fouls and gets wedged in one of these perforations in the ramp and stops the car dead. The rear tires did about a rotation because the car stopped completely, and the ass end of the car stepped out and slammed into the side of the trailer. And this is the result. That mark is where the car was resting up against the side of the trailer. So I've got a damaged sill panel here that I may or may not be able to panel beat out. And I believe the sill behind it has got a small dent in it as well. Now, as you can imagine, that was absolutely gut-wrenching when that car hit the side of the trailer. But not only that, I was screwed because I couldn't drive the car down the ramp because the shock was pushed through that ramp, and I couldn't back it up either. So I rang up my mate Arch and said, hey Archie, I'm in a world of hurt here, mate. Can you come down and give me a hand? Half an hour later, Archie pulls up with his cruiser and a trolley jack. So what did we do? We hooked up a strap to the rear diff and we pulled the car sideways on the ramp with his cruiser, just enough to get it squared. So it shifted over. Now we got the ass end of the car sitting on the ramp square. On this side, however, we've still got the shock punched through that ramp. So we popped a trolley jack underneath the chassis, jacked the car up until that shock came out of that ramp, and then put some blocks under the tires so that the tire was sitting high enough to make sure that that shock could clear those ramps. So now I've got a car that's sitting square on the trailer and the front end is no longer hung up. And from that point forward, it was an easy winch job onto the back of the trailer, just using the hand crank type trailer winch. So now I'm home and I've got to address those issues. First things first, I got to deal with that control arm. And here is how I'm going to do this. These are tubular control arms from a company in the States called Global West Suspension, and they are designed specifically for coilover shocks. You can see here where the base of the shock bolts in. This is all reinforced and it's very, very thick metal. So that is not going to let go like the original lower control arms did on my 57 Chev. So if there's a lesson for anybody in this one, if you've got coilovers, don't use those original Chevy control arms because eventually they'll punch through just like mine did. And what was probably the only good news situation out of this whole scenario, Jill, my wife, just happened to be over in LA when this whole thing happened. So I gave her a call and said, hey Jill, can you actually drive over to this Global West Suspension joint, pick up these control arms for me and bring them back to Australia? Which she dutifully did, which was awesome. So I had these control arms back in Australia only a few days after my original ones had failed. So first things first in this video, I'm going to pull off the original Chevy lower control arms and I'm going to replace them with these tubular control arms. Let's get stuck into that job now. First thing I'm going to do is take this sway bar off to remove some stress off that lower control arm. Good thing about these cars, you got a 1/2 inch, 5/8, 9/16, and a 7/16. You can pretty much take them completely apart. All right, I'll go over to the other side now so that I take the stress off of it and I can lift that sway bar up. Pop that out of there. All right, sway bar up out of the road. Now we'll get this cotter pin out of here so that I can get this lower castle nut off. Done. 7/8. That control arm is out of the spindle. Now I just need to remove these bolts from the chassis and it should fall down. The tricky bit will be getting that shock back through the hole which it's punched through, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Actually, you know what I'm gonna do? It looks like that's got a little circlip and I might be able to punch out this mounting point out of the shock itself. I think I'll do that next because that looks like it's bent anyway, so I've got to straighten it. But once that's out of the road, that shock should slip outside that lower control arm with ease. Here's one side bolt. It's 9/16, but it's a real fine thread. Must be a UNF. She's coming through. Nice. That'll allow me to get that shock up there, no worries. There we go, one lower control arm. There's our two control arms side by side, and boy oh boy, what a difference. These tubular control arms are a lot more heavy duty. Have a look at the size of that cross shaft compared to that one there. Of course, that plate is all reinforced, whereas that was just the pressed steel. And what I do like about these control arms is they come with a sway bar mounting point. They already come with the ball joint, and they've already got the bump stop as well, plus all your hardware. So this is basically ready to bolt straight in. Now, time to install this lower control arm. And they have got a driver's side and passenger side written right on them. So I love that idiot proofness. Okay, run our bolts through, grab our control arm, slide him on, pop a couple of nuts temporarily in place. Not sure why, but the other side has got this component that is detachable. I'm sure there's a reason for it. All right, that's our control arm bolts. Now it says in the instructions to tighten these suckers down to 55 foot-pounds. So that's what I'll do next. 55 foot-pound. Now that I've got my control arm bolted in place, I'm trying to line these shocks into the bolt holes. I'm just using a ratchet strap to pull it into place for me. Okay, the shock is in place. Let's get this ratchet strap out of here. Now the last thing to do is get this ball joint into the spindle. Okay, I've got my lower control arm lined up in the spindle. I've got the shock compressed with the weight of the car and a ratchet strap pulling down on it as well. So now we'll slowly release the ratchet strap to get that lower control arm into the spindle. Now it's just the weight of the car. So very, very, very slowly drop that down. Ah, beautiful. Now we put on our big honkin' castle nut. And what was that sucker torqued down to? It was a lot. 80 foot-pounds. Now we'll crank this torque wrench up to 80. Right there. Beautiful. And look at that, the cotter pin holes are even lined up. That never happens, hey? Lined up perfectly too. Okie dokie, that side is done. Now the only thing I need to do is hook the sway bar up, but I won't do that until I go over to the other side and replace the control arm on the other side. But that sway bar will fit in there just perfectly. All right, both sides done, tires on, all buttoned up. Time to drop her onto the ground and see whether my ride height is the same. I've adjusted the coilover shocks to exactly where they were with the old control arms. So we'll just see what happens here. Give it a shake to settle it down. 611 millimeters. Let's check this side. 610 millimeters. 1 millimeter out from side to side. We'll call that a win. All right, time to take her on the road for a test drive. Okay, just got back from the ride. Suspension is not set up quite the way I want it. It's sitting too high on the front, so I'll lower the front using the adjusting rings on the coilovers. And also the alignment is out, which doesn't surprise me because we've obviously replaced the control arms. And if there's any small changes in the dimensions or the angles in those control arms, then that's gonna throw your steering out. But first things first, I'll lower this thing, probably another 25 mil on either side. And then we'll take her back out for another test drive. Now to adjust these coilovers, we've got to take the tires back off because it's just a lot easier to get in there. Pop the tire off. Now these are the tools that you use to adjust the coilovers. One spanner is used for the lock ring and the other spanner is used for the adjusting nut itself. These two spanners are different from one another, so you got to get the right one in the right spot. There we go. Now I wanted to drop that about 25 mil. So I'll run this locking ring down 25 mil and then I'll back this one down that 25 mil and that'll get me exactly what I need. And because I know the left side and the right side of the car are the same height, I'll do the exact same thing on both sides of the car. There's 25 mil there. So when I back that one down to that ring, I'll be on the money. Put a bit of lubricant on that ring just to help facilitate it getting down a little bit easier, because obviously there's a lot of pressure on these springs. And that's it. We just keep turning and turning and turning until we get it to the point where we want it. It's not a fast job, but it is an easy way to adjust the ride height of your car. And that right there is the advantage of coilover springs. The disadvantage when you use them on stock control arms is they punch through the bottom of the control arm and destroy your car. Been there, done that. Now we'll lock these two rings together. And there we go. Ride height adjusted. Now the other thing, the shocks I thought were a little bit harsh. So I'm going to dial them down 1 click. Now that harshness could be because of those springs were compressed up. But if it was the spring that was giving me the harsh ride, it's easy enough to come in here and adjust the shock again. Don't need to pull the tire off. You can reach in there, no problem at all. Okay, passenger side finished. Now I'll jump over to the driver's side, rinse and repeat, and we'll drop it down on the ground and see what the ride height looks like. All right, that side's all adjusted now. Time to pop that tire back on, drop it on the ground, see what a ride height looks like. Who said that adjusting coilover shocks was not a dangerous job? Far out. Maybe it's not so dangerous in the hands of somebody that knows what they're doing. 785 on the passenger side, 785 on the driver's side. Beautiful, perfect. Time for my favorite part, another test drive. Okay, test drive time. One thing I can note straight away is it pulls significantly to the left. Never used to do that, so obviously something's out in the geometry with those control arms. When I used to turn this corner, the tires would scrub the guards a little bit. Let's see if that still happens. No, didn't do it that time. definitely skatier on the road than it was before as well. So something is out in the geometry of the steering, most definitely. So I'll just do a really short test drive so that I don't scrub tires out before I get it to the shop to get a front end alignment. I'll just go up to the roundabout here. Chucky, oh yeah, I can hear the tires sort of screeching as I go around this corner, so they are definitely out of alignment. I'm gonna turn around now before I do any tire damage and head back home. But she's riding nice in terms of the suspension setup and everything. We've got that dialed in, got the ride height dialed in as well. One good thing about putting cameras in funky locations is that you see things like this. This castle nut on the upper ball joint is not seated, so the alignment shop sorted that out for me when they were doing the front end alignment and ran those two nuts down on both sides. That could have caused some dramas in the future, but the issue's all sorted. All right, we're back in the shed. So what have we done here? We've replaced those lower control arms, adjusted the coilover shocks and got the ride height dialed in, and adjusted the shocks and got the rebound and the dampening on the shocks dialed in. Whew! So what's next? One, I gotta take this sucker in and get a wheel alignment. That is a must, and that is going to be the next thing on the cards. Secondly, I've still got to address this stainless steel strip on the opposite side of the car. Ow! A March fly just nailed me in the back. I may or may not do a video of that in the future. If that sounds like something that you guys might find interesting, let me know. I think I'm gonna change gears, however, at the moment and jump back over on the FJ45. You wanna see what's happening on that? Stay tuned, we'll catch up with you a bit later. Keep the shiny side up, everybody. Bye now.